Do you really believe you only use 10% of your brain? What if I told you that claim is one of the biggest myths about the human body? And it's far from the only one. Since childhood, we've been taught certain truths about our bodies that upon closer inspection turn out to be pure fiction. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into our knowledge and debunk 15 popular facts about the human body that are, in reality, nothing more than myths. Brace yourselves, because some of these revelations might genuinely surprise you and change the way you see yourself. So, where do these misconceptions even come from? Often, they're outdated scientific data that have long been disproven. Sometimes, they're the result of misinterpreted studies that spread like wildfire. And some myths are simply old wives' tales that have become so deeply ingrained in our lives, we never even question their validity. So, let's separate fact from fiction. Alright, let's dive in. Myth number 1. The undisputed king of all misconceptions about the human body. You've almost certainly heard it. It goes like this: we only use 10% of our brain. This fact is so popular, it's formed the basis for Hollywood blockbusters like Lucy or Limitless. The idea that we could unlock the remaining 90% and become super geniuses with incredible powers sounds incredibly tempting. But let's be honest. In reality, this is one of the biggest scientific myths in history. Modern science, especially neuroscience, completely debunks it. If you look at the brain through a functional MRI or PET scanner, the picture becomes absolutely clear. Even when you're just lying still, seemingly not thinking about anything, your brain lights up with activity like a Christmas tree. Different areas are responsible for different processes: breathing, heartbeat, processing memories, planning dinner. There aren't any dark or dormant 90%. Let's approach this from a logical and evolutionary perspective. Our brain is an incredibly greedy organ. It makes up only about 2% of your body weight, yet it consumes a whopping 20% of all your energy and oxygen. Imagine nature creating such an energy-intensive computer, only for 90% of its capacity to sit idle. That would be a colossal waste of resources that evolution simply wouldn't permit. And here's another killer argument. Think about the consequences of head injuries. If 90% of the brain were useless ballast, then most strokes or traumatic brain injuries would pass without a trace. But we know that's not the case. Damage to even a tiny part of the brain can lead to catastrophic consequences: loss of speech, memory, or motor functions. This is direct proof that the brain has no spare or unused parts. Every area, no matter how specialized, plays a crucial role. So, where did this myth come from? Its exact origin is hard to pinpoint. Some point to early 20th century psychologist William James, who once suggested we use only a small part of our mental potential, but he was talking about potential, not physical parts of the brain. This phrase was simply misunderstood and spread worldwide. In conclusion, we use 100% of our brain. It's just that not all parts are active at full capacity simultaneously, much like you don't tense all the muscles in your body at the exact same moment. Our potential lies not in unlocking some hidden zones, but in our brain's ability to create new neural connections throughout life. This process is called neuroplasticity, and it's precisely what allows us to learn, adapt, and grow. So, forget about the 10% myth. Your brain is already working at full capacity. Next up on our list of common misconceptions, remember that familiar diagram from your biology textbook, the tongue map, neatly divided into taste zones: sweet at the tip, bitter at the back, and salty and sour along the sides. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? We all learned this in school. Well, prepare to be surprised, or perhaps even delighted. That map is complete nonsense. It's a scientific myth that's been passed down in textbooks for decades. In reality, it's both much simpler and at the same time more complex. Our tongues are covered in tiny bumps called taste papillae, and inside those are taste buds. And these taste buds, containing specialized receptors, are capable of detecting all the primary tastes: sweet, salty, sour, and bitter. And even the fifth, relatively recently recognized taste, Umami, the savoury taste, often associated with protein-rich foods. Yes, it's true that sensitivity to certain tastes can vary slightly across different areas of the tongue. Some regions might indeed react slightly more intensely to sweet or bitter, but this difference is so minor that you won't even notice it. There are no strict, exclusive zones whatsoever. You can taste the sweetness of sugar with the tip, the back, or any part of your tongue, just as the bitterness of coffee can be detected across its entire surface. So, where did this incorrect map come from? Its history is a classic example of the telephone game phenomenon in science. It all began in 1901 with research by the German scientist David P. Hennig. He did indeed discover those slight variations in sensitivity across different parts of the tongue, but in his findings, he never spoke of strict, exclusive zoning. However, his work was mistranslated, and even worse, vastly oversimplified by Harvard psychologist Edwin G. Boring in the 1940s. It was this simplified and distorted diagram that then spread around the world, making its way into textbooks, and consequently, our very own minds. So, the next time you're enjoying your favourite meal, know this: your entire tongue participates in that feast of flavours, not just specific parts following a rigid schedule. You can confidently discard that old taste map from your mind. Now let's talk about a myth that almost everyone who's ever picked up a razor is familiar with. It goes something like this: if you shave, your hair will grow back thicker, darker, and coarser. This fact has been passed down through generations, making many young women fear razors like the plague, while ironically encouraging teenage boys to shave more often in hopes of growing a thick beard. But what does science have to say? It reveals this is nothing more than a pure optical illusion. Here's why. Let's picture a strand of hair. At its base, near the skin, it's thicker. Towards the tip, it naturally tapers, becoming softer and lighter due to sun exposure and friction. When you shave a hair, you cut it off right at the skin surface, effectively at its widest point. So what happens next? The hair begins to grow back, but it grows back with that blunt, wide end. Naturally, it feels rougher and pricklier to the touch compared to the soft, tapered tip it had before. Additionally, a short freshly grown hair appears darker because it hasn't had time to be lightened by the sun. And that's the simple truth. Shaving has absolutely no effect on the hair follicle, which is located deep beneath the skin. It's the follicle that determines the hair's thickness, colour, and growth rate. A razor only works on the surface. It cannot alter your genetics. The number of follicles you have is set from birth, and shaving won't increase it. Your hair won't grow back thicker. You'll simply have the same amount as before. You can easily test this effect. If you stop shaving and let your hair grow out, over time, the tips will thin out again, become softer, and all the perceived coarseness and thickness will disappear. It will return to its normal state. So, this myth is simply the result of a misperception. We see short, dark, prickly stubble and jump to the hasty conclusion that our hair has changed its structure. But in reality, only the cut end has changed. Shaving is just a haircut, an extremely short one, and it affects hair thickness just as much as a trip to the barbershop or salon does, which is to say, not at all. Alright, myth number 4. This is a sound everyone knows. Yes, that distinctive cracking or popping of your joints. And almost certainly, when you were a kid, you heard, "Stop cracking your knuckles, or you'll get arthritis when you're older." This old wives' tale is so ingrained that many people still approach the habit with apprehension. But let's figure out what actually happens when you crack your joints, and if there's really anything to be afraid of. First, what exactly is that sound? Inside our joints, there's a special substance called synovial fluid. It acts as a lubricant, allowing your bones to glide smoothly past each other. Dissolved within this fluid are gases, primarily nitrogen. When you stretch a joint, like bending your finger back, you increase the space between the bones. The pressure in the joint capsule drops, and the dissolved gases instantly form a bubble. This sudden formation and subsequent collapse of a gas bubble is what produces that characteristic click or pop. After this, the gas needs time to redissolve into the fluid, which is why you can't crack the same joint twice in a row. You usually have to wait about 15 to 20 minutes. So what about the link to arthritis? This is the big question, and the answer is a resounding no. Numerous scientific studies have found absolutely no connection between the habit of cracking your knuckles and the development of osteoarthritis. There's even a humorous and very telling story about this. A doctor named Donald Unger decided to conduct an experiment on himself. For 60 years, he consistently cracked the knuckles on only his left hand, while leaving his right hand untouched. After 6 decades, he compared the condition of the joints on both hands. And what do you think? No difference whatsoever. No arthritis had developed in his left hand. For this research, by the way, he was awarded the humorous yet prestigious Ig Nobel Prize. Of course, this doesn't mean that cracking your knuckles is some kind of super healthy activity. In very rare instances, overly aggressive or forceful bending of your fingers could potentially lead to ligament sprains or reduced grip strength, but these are definite exceptions, not the rule. So if the sound simply irritates you, that's one thing. But from a medical standpoint, there's no need to worry. This habit certainly won't put you on a direct path to arthritis. Myth number 5 is a cornerstone of healthy living, seemingly set in stone. You must drink 8 glasses of water a day. This is the 8x8 rule. 8 8-ounce glasses, totaling roughly 2 litres. Dietitians, fitness trainers, and glossy magazines all promote this advice. It sounds simple, clear, and highly authoritative. But is this actually true? Is this figure, 2 litres, a universal and mandatory requirement for absolutely everyone on the planet? The answer? No, it's not. This rule is a vast oversimplification that fails to account for numerous individual factors. First, let's understand where this recommendation even came from. Its origins often trace back to a 1945 report from the US Food and Nutrition Board. It did state that an average adult needs about 2.5 litres of water daily. However, what many people overlook is the very next sentence in that same report. Most of this quantity is contained in prepared foods, and that's the key. We don't just get water from a bottle. It's present in soups, fruits, vegetables, juices, tea, coffee, and even in meat dishes. A cucumber or a watermelon, for example, are over 90% water. So if your diet is rich in these kinds of foods, you're already covering a significant portion of your fluid needs. Second, your water needs are highly individual. They depend on your weight, age, activity level, the climate you live in, and even your health status. An athlete training for several hours on a hot day will need far more water than an office worker sitting all day in air conditioning. So, how much water should you drink? The best and most reliable indicator given to us by nature is the feeling of thirst. If you drink when you're thirsty, you're most likely getting enough fluids. Another simple way to check is the colour of your urine. Normally, it should be light yellow. If it's dark and concentrated, that's a signal it's time to drink water. And if it's crystal clear, you might even be overdoing it. Ultimately, the 8 glasses rule isn't a strict law, but rather a very general guideline. There's no need to force yourself to drink water if you're not thirsty. Just listen to your body. It's far smarter than any generalised recommendations. Here's our next myth, and it's a common one that really troubles many parents. It goes something like this: sugar makes kids hyper. You've probably seen this scenario: a child's birthday party with cake, candy, and sweet soda. And within half an hour, the kids are literally bouncing off the walls, running wild, screaming, full of boundless energy. The immediate conclusion many jump to is, it's definitely the sugar. This myth is so widespread that parents often limit sugary treats before big events or bedtime, hoping to keep their kids calm. The logic appears sound. Sugar provides quick energy, so an abundance of it should naturally lead to a burst of activity. However, Despite how widely this idea is believed, scientific research simply doesn't back it up. Numerous studies have been conducted to investigate this link, and the findings have been quite surprising. In what are known as double-blind studies, when neither the children, their parents, nor even the researchers knew if a child was given a sugary drink or one with a safe placebo sweetener, absolutely no difference in behaviour was observed. Kids who received the placebo were just as active as those who had actual sugar. So if sugar isn't the culprit, then what is going on? Why do we so consistently perceive this link in everyday life? The real explanation lies in psychology, not physiology. Firstly, it's the expectancy effect in parents. If you're convinced that sugar will make your child wild, you'll subconsciously look for and interpret any energetic behaviour as proof, while overlooking times they're calm. Essentially, your brain confirms its own bias. Secondly, and perhaps most crucially, it's about context. When do kids typically consume a lot of sugar? At birthday parties, holidays, family gatherings, or during school breaks. These are already inherently exciting, stimulating, and often emotionally charged environments. Kids aren't hyper because of the sugar in the cake. They're energized by the overall atmosphere of fun, games, social interaction with friends, and a break from their usual routine. The sugar in these instances is merely a coincidence, not the cause. Now, none of this is to say that sugar is good for you. Too much sugar is indeed bad for teeth, contributes to weight gain, and can lead to other health issues. So limiting sugary treats in your child's diet is absolutely the right thing to do. However, do it for overall health benefits, not because of a baseless belief that it causes hyperactivity. The real reason for all that exuberant party energy, it's the party itself, not that slice of cake. Myth number 7. You've probably heard this one from your mom or grandma countless times, especially when you were a kid, trying to read a book under the covers with a flashlight. Don't read in bad light, you'll ruin your eyes. This idea seems perfectly logical. When there's not much light, your eyes have to strain to make out the letters, and it feels like that overexertion must inevitably damage your vision. Many of us still feel a pang of guilt when we read on our smartphone screens in a dark room, thinking we're doing irreversible damage to our eyes. But let's find out if that's actually true. The good news is that reading in dim light doesn't cause irreversible organic damage to your eyes and won't lead to the development of nearsightedness or other diseases. Our eyes are an incredibly adaptive system. When light is scarce, the pupil dilates to let more light onto the retina, and the photoreceptor cells, rods and cones, work in overdrive. Yes, reading in dim light does make your eyes tire faster. You might experience strain, dryness, or a headache. This is called asthenopia, or eye strain. Your eye muscles have to work harder to focus on the text, and you might blink less frequently, leading to corneal dryness. But all these symptoms are temporary. They completely disappear as soon as you give your eyes a rest or turn on proper lighting. It's similar to muscle fatigue in your legs after a long run. They might ache, but it doesn't mean you've caused them irreversible damage. Think about our ancestors who lived for thousands of years without electricity. They had to perform countless tasks by the light of a campfire, a torch, or the moon. If their vision deteriorated so quickly and irreversibly from this, humanity would have faced serious problems long ago. So, while reading in good light is undoubtedly much more comfortable and productive, you don't need to panic if you find yourself reading in dim light for a while. You're not ruining your vision in the long term. The main thing is to listen to your body. If you feel your eyes getting tired, just take a break and let them rest. Or even better, just turn up the light. Let's move on to our 8th point, one that truly blurs the line between science and horror movies, the myth that hair and nails continue to grow after death. This image is often depicted in movies and books, creating a chilling and mystical effect. It's quite easy to picture this. The body lies still, while hair and nails seemingly continue to grow, as if life hasn't entirely departed. It does sound quite terrifying, but, in truth, no actual post-mortem growth happens. This effect is merely an optical illusion, caused by natural processes that occur in the body after death. Let's take a look at the biology behind it. Hair and nail growth require complex hormonal and cellular processes. Cells at the base of the hair follicle and nail bed must actively divide, and cell division requires energy. They obtain this energy from glucose, which in turn requires oxygen for processing. When a person dies, their heart stops, blood circulation ceases, and as a result, the supply of oxygen and nutrients to the cells is cut off. Without this fuel, cell division, and indeed any form of growth, becomes utterly impossible. All biological processes cease. So how does this illusion of growth arise? The key lies with the skin. After death, the body begins to dehydrate. The skin loses moisture and as a result, dries out and slightly shrinks, pulling back. This is especially noticeable on the fingertips and scalp. Imagine, the skin around the nail has pulled back slightly, exposing the part of the nail plate that was previously hidden. Visually, the nail appears longer. The same thing happens with hair. The scalp tightens and a man's stubble or short hair becomes more noticeable, as if protruding above the surface. They haven't grown a single millimetre. It's simply that the skin around them has receded. This effect is especially noticeable in men who were shaved shortly before death. A day or two after death, visible stubble may appear on their face, which is what gave rise to the myth that hair continues to grow. But the reason, as we now know, isn't actual growth, but the shrinking of the skin. So, this creepy myth is merely an optical illusion based on post-mortem skin changes. No mysticism here, just pure physiology. Myth number 9 is one of the internet's most enduring nightmares and a classic example of how a fabricated story can become widely accepted as fact. It goes like this. The average person swallows 8 spiders in their sleep over a lifetime. Just let that number sink in. 8! For many people suffering from arachnophobia, the mere thought is enough to trigger a full-blown panic attack. This statistic has been floating around the internet for years, reprinted in countless articles, discussed on forums, and genuinely believed by many. But let's take a moment to apply some logic and common sense and see why this myth simply doesn't hold up. First, let's consider this from a spider's perspective. Spiders are incredibly cautious creatures. Their very survival depends on sensing the slightest vibrations. A sleeping human is a constant source of danger to them. We breathe, creating air currents. Our hearts beat, causing vibrations. We toss and turn in our sleep. A bed is essentially an epicenter of noise and movement. For a spider, crawling into the open, breathing, vibrating mouth of a sleeping giant would be a sure path to suicide. It simply goes against all their self-preservation instincts. They seek quiet, dark, secluded spots, not an active volcano. Secondly, let's look at it from our point of view. Even when we're asleep, our reflexes are still active. If something tickles our lips or face, and a spider's delicate legs would definitely do just that, we'd most likely wake up, or at the very least, instinctively brush the irritant away. The chances of a spider not only scurrying across your face, but deliberately crawling into your mouth, and then you swallowing it without ever waking up, are virtually zero. So, where did this peculiar tale come from? Its origin story is actually quite amusing. It's widely believed that journalist Lisa Holst concocted it in 1993 for an article in PC Professional magazine. Her aim was to demonstrate how easily people believe information published online, no matter how absurd. She compiled a list of ridiculous facts, including the infamous spider one, to illustrate just how quickly misinformation can spread. And ironically, this very fact went viral and persists to this day, perfectly proving her initial point. So, you can finally sleep soundly. The likelihood of you swallowing a spider in your sleep is roughly the same as a unicorn flying into your bedroom. Rest assured, your mouth is not a spider's dining room. Myth number 10. A misconception ingrained right in the name of the illness itself. We say, I caught a cold, or I have a cold, and immediately a picture forms in our minds. Getting soaked in the rain, freezing at a bus stop, sitting in a draft. The logical chain seems obvious. Cold equals sickness. From childhood, our mums would bundle us up in scarves, shouting, "Put on a hat or you'll get sick." And as we grow up, we continue to believe that the main cause of sniffles and coughs is getting too cold. But is that really true? From a medical standpoint, the cause of the common cold isn't cold weather, but viruses. The common cold, or acute respiratory viral infection, ARVI, is caused by hundreds of different viruses, most often rhinoviruses. To get sick, the virus needs to enter the mucous membranes of your nose or throat. These viruses are transmitted through airborne droplets. When an infected person coughs or sneezes near you, or through contact, when you touch a surface with the virus on it, and then touch your face. So, where does cold fit into all this? Were our mothers and grandmothers completely wrong? Not entirely. Cold itself cannot create a virus out of thin air. You can't catch a cold by being alone on an uninhabited island in Antarctica if there are no virus sources there. But cold weather can indeed create conditions that facilitate virus spread and make our bodies more vulnerable. Firstly, when it's cold outside, we spend much more time indoors in poorly ventilated spaces, in offices, schools, and public transport. In such close quarters, viruses are much more easily transmitted from person to person. Secondly, cold and dry air, especially in heated indoor spaces, can dry out the mucous membranes in our noses. And dry mucous membranes mean a weakened barrier. It becomes easier for viruses to penetrate them and enter the body. Thirdly, some research suggests that getting too cold might temporarily weaken our immune response. For example, chilling in the nose might slow down the cilia that clear out pathogens and reduce the activity of immune cells, but this is only a contributing factor, not the root cause. In conclusion, to catch a cold, you absolutely need to come into contact with a virus. Cold isn't the cause, rather, it's a catalyst that can increase your chances of picking up an infection. So, while dressing appropriately for the weather and avoiding getting too cold is certainly wise, it's equally important during cold season to wash your hands frequently and avoid close contact with sick people. Now let's talk about a myth that probably put a damper on your childhood pool or beach days. Rule number 1 at every summer camp or public beach: don't swim for at least an hour after eating. We were warned that breaking this rule would inevitably lead to debilitating cramps and you could drown. This scare tactic was so convincing that many adults still hesitate to get in the water after a meal. So, where did this rule come from? And is there any truth to it? The idea behind this myth sounds quite logical. When we eat, the body directs an increased blood flow to the stomach and intestines to aid digestion. Consequently, the theory goes, blood is diverted away from the muscles in your arms and legs, and if your muscles lack blood supply and oxygen, they might fail while swimming, leading to a spasm or cramp. Sounds plausible, right? But in reality, our bodies are much smarter than that. Yes, blood flow to the digestive system does increase after eating, but that doesn't mean your limbs are left deprived of blood. Our body has enough blood to both digest food and supply your muscles during moderate physical activity like regular swimming. For you to get a cramp from a lack of blood supply, you'd need to be a professional athlete attempting to swim the English Channel against the clock right after a massive meal. For casual swimming and splashing around, your muscles will always have enough oxygen. What's more, there are no documented cases of drowning where swimming after eating was the sole cause. The American Red Cross and other reputable water safety organisations have long revised their recommendations and state that there's no need to wait an hour or even half an hour after eating. Of course, swimming immediately after a very heavy, rich meal might simply be uncomfortable. You might feel a bit of stomach heaviness, nausea, or burping. But that's a matter of discomfort, not mortal danger. The only real danger related to eating and swimming is alcohol. Alcohol impairs coordination, slows reaction time, and can give a false sense of confidence, which is the cause of many water tragedies. So, after a light snack, you can confidently go for a swim without checking the clock. But after drinking alcohol, it's best to stay out of the water entirely. Myth number 12 isn't just a misconception, It's a legendary tale with all the elements of a spy thriller. It goes something like this. Carrots improve your night vision. How many of us were told as kids, eat your carrots and you'll see in the dark like a cat? And we dutifully munched on those orange roots hoping to gain superpowers. And here's why this myth is so compelling. There's a grain of truth to it. Carrots are indeed rich in beta-carotene, which our bodies convert into vitamin A. Vitamin A, in turn, is absolutely crucial for eye health. It plays a vital role in the synthesis of rhodopsin, a visual pigment found in the rod cells of the retina, responsible for vision in low light. A severe deficiency of vitamin A can lead to a condition known as night blindness or hemeralopia, characterized by a significant decline in vision during twilight. And in this specific scenario, and only in this scenario, consuming carrots or other vitamin A-rich foods can indeed help restore normal night vision. But here's the catch. If you don't have a vitamin A deficiency and your night vision is already within the normal range, then eating carrots by the pound won't give you owl-like acuity. You won't gain superhuman night vision. You'll simply achieve your normal, genetically predetermined visual capacity. Any excess beta-carotene will either be excreted by your body or, in extreme cases, stored in your skin, potentially giving it a harmless yet amusing yellowish tint. Now for the most interesting part. Where did this exaggerated version of the myth actually come from? Its roots trace back to World War II. In 1940, the British Royal Air Force, or RAF, began successfully shooting down German bombers at night. To conceal their cutting-edge and highly classified technology, airborne radars that truly allowed their pilots to see the enemy in the dark, the British Ministry of Information launched an ingenious propaganda campaign. They began circulating stories in newspapers about their top pilots, claiming they possessed phenomenal night vision thanks to a special carrot-rich diet. This narrative was eagerly picked up by the press and quickly spread worldwide. The civilian population also started consuming carrots enthusiastically, hoping to improve their own vision during nightly blackouts. The plan worked perfectly. The Germans bought into the carrot tale, while the true reason for the RAF's successes remained a closely guarded secret. And the myth proved so tenacious that it has persisted right up to the present day. So, while carrots are certainly beneficial for your eyes, they won't, unfortunately, turn you into a superhero. The 13th item on our list is a myth we learned back in elementary school. Humans only have 5 senses. Let's list them: sight, hearing, smell, touch, and taste. This classification, proposed by Aristotle over 2,000 years ago, seems immutable and complete. We've become so accustomed to it that we don't even stop to consider if it's truly accurate. In reality, however, this quintet is a massive oversimplification. Modern science suggests that humans possess far more ways of perceiving the world, and the number of senses can reach 20 or even more, depending on how they're classified. Let's explore just a few of them that you use every day, often without even realizing it. First up is thermoception, our sense of heat and cold. When you touch a hot cup or feel a cool breeze, it's not simply your sense of touch at work. Instead, it's distinct receptors in your skin, specifically reacting to temperature. Secondly, we have nociception, the sense of pain. This isn't just extreme touch, it's a separate, complex system that signals tissue damage to our brain. It has its own dedicated receptors that respond to various types of pain: sharp, dull, or burning. Moving on, there's proprioception, also known as kinesthesia or body awareness. Close your eyes and touch your index finger to the tip of your nose. You did it, right? You didn't use your sight or hearing to accomplish that. Proprioception is precisely what gives your brain information about the position of your limbs and body parts in relation to each other in space. Thanks to this sense, we can walk without looking down at our feet and coordinate our movements. Then there's our sense of balance, also known as equilibrioception. This is managed by our vestibular system, located in the inner ear. It enables us to maintain equilibrium, understand up from down, and perceive acceleration. Furthermore, we can identify interoception, the sense of our body's internal state. This includes feelings like hunger, thirst, fullness, or the need to use the restroom. These are internal signals, no less crucial than external ones. So to confine the immense richness of our perception to just 5 senses is like trying to describe a rainbow with only one colour. Our body is an incredibly complex sensory instrument, constantly gathering and processing vast streams of information from both inside and out, utilising far more than just 5 channels to do so. Myth number 14 explores a topic that's on many people's minds: the idea that stress turns your hair grey. We frequently hear anecdotal tales of individuals who supposedly went completely grey overnight after a profound shock, or who noticed a sudden proliferation of grey hairs after enduring a tough period in their lives. The enduring image of someone greyed by grief is firmly embedded in our cultural psyche, and much like several other pervasive myths, this particular assertion does indeed contain a tiny kernel of truth. However, that truth has been significantly embellished and exaggerated. So let's take a closer look at what actually happens. Our hair colour is determined by a pigment called melanin, which is produced by specialised cells known as melanocytes, located within our hair follicles. As we age, these melanocytes gradually deplete and eventually die off. Once a follicle no longer contains active melanocytes, the hair it produces grows out colourless, appearing grey or white. This entire process is primarily genetically programmed. In fact, your genes largely dictate when you'll start noticing grey hairs and how rapidly the process will progress. So, can stress actually interfere with this process? For a long time, scientists remained largely skeptical. However, recent groundbreaking research, including studies conducted at Harvard University, has indeed shown that severe stress can accelerate the greying process. But the mechanism behind this phenomenon isn't quite what you might expect. What happens is that stress activates the sympathetic nervous system, the very system responsible for our fight or flight response. This system then releases a hormone called noradrenaline. Research has revealed that noradrenaline actually damages and prematurely depletes the melanocyte stem cells within our hair follicles. These stem cells are essentially our body's reserve, crucial for generating new pigment-producing cells. Once this vital reserve is exhausted, the follicle permanently loses its ability to produce coloured hair. However, there are a few critical caveats. First, we're talking about genuinely severe, acute, or chronic stress. Your everyday worries and anxieties are unlikely to have such a profound impact. Second, this process certainly doesn't happen overnight. A hair that has already grown and is pigmented cannot suddenly lose its colour. Grey hairs only appear when a new strand grows in, replacing an old one, and this new strand is already devoid of pigment. This entire cycle typically takes weeks, even months. So, while going grey overnight is physiologically impossible, accelerating the onset of greying by several years due to a prolonged, difficult period that, according to the latest research, is indeed quite real. Yet despite this, your genes remain the primary conductor of the entire process. And now, for our 15th and final myth on the list. This one dives into the world of healthy eating and often leads us to pay more at the grocery store. The myth goes, brown sugar is healthier than white sugar. We see it in coffee shops, buy it in health food aisles, and add it to our baking, convinced we're making a wiser, more health-conscious choice. Brown sugar certainly looks more natural and unprocessed, and marketing actively reinforces this image. But let's look beyond its colour and consider its actual composition and how it affects our bodies. So, what is sugar, fundamentally? Regular white sugar, or sucrose, is a product derived from sugarcane or sugar beets, which undergoes extensive purification or refining. This refining process removes everything but pure sucrose. And what about brown sugar? In most cases, especially for mass-market products, it's the exact same refined white sugar, to which a small amount of molasses or sugarcane syrup has simply been added back during the final stage of production. It's this molasses that gives it its characteristic brown colour, moist texture, and subtle caramel flavour. Yes, molasses does contain trace amounts of minerals like calcium, potassium, and iron. And that's the basis for all the claims about brown sugar's health benefits. But let's be realistic. The quantity of these micronutrients is so minuscule that it has absolutely no meaningful impact on your health. To get any discernible benefit, you'd have to consume such an enormous amount of brown sugar that the harm would vastly outweigh any potential good. From a nutritional standpoint, white and brown sugar are virtually identical. They're both 97 and 99% pure sucrose, have the same caloric content, and affect blood sugar levels in precisely the same way. Our bodies process them identically. So, the choice between white and brown sugar really comes down to personal taste and culinary application. Brown sugar is fantastic for baking, especially when you want that moist texture and a hint of caramel. But considering it a healthy alternative to white sugar is simply self-deception. If you genuinely want to reduce the negative effects of sugar, the only effective way is to cut back on your overall consumption, regardless of its colour. What's truly fascinating, and perhaps a little alarming, is this. Some of these myths aren't just harmless misconceptions. They actively shape our behaviour and our approach to personal health. Take the 10% brain myth, for instance. It's more than just a factual error. It limits our perception of our own capabilities. We tend to believe there's this vast, untapped potential within us, when in fact, our brains are already firing on all cylinders. And what about the classic tale of carrots and eyesight? That's a truly ingenious piece of disinformation. The British Royal Air Force during World War II deliberately spread that rumour to conceal their groundbreaking new technology, radar, which actually allowed their pilots to see enemy aircraft at night. And believe it or not, that myth persists to this day. Even seemingly beneficial rules like the 8 glasses of water guideline aren't a universal truth, but merely an average recommendation that isn't suitable for everyone. Quite the revelation, isn't it? We often find ourselves bound by stories invented decades, even centuries ago. As you can see, the human body is an incredibly complex and fascinating system, often surrounded by a myriad of misconceptions. Debunking these myths isn't just interesting, it's genuinely valuable. It teaches us to think critically and to question things, rather than simply accepting them at face value, even if they seem like widely known truths. Thank you for sticking with this video to the very end. If you found any of this information insightful and you're keen for more myth-busting content, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our future releases. So, what human body myth did you believe for the longest time? Share your stories in the comments below. I'd be genuinely fascinated to read them.